Some actors spend their entire careers protecting a single image: the charming hero, the action star, the romantic lead. It is safe, predictable, comfortable. But Robert Pattinson never seemed interested in comfort, long before he wore the cape of Batman, before critics began calling him one of the most daring actors of his generation. He was already making choices that confused Hollywood. While studios hoped to turn him into a permanent heartthrob after Twilight, Pattinson quietly stepped away from the spotlight and walked towards something far stranger. He chose films where the characters were broken, isolated, or deeply unsettling. A desperate criminal running through neon-lit streets, a lonely prisoner raising a child in deep space, a lighthouse keeper slowly losing his mind beside a raging sea. Each role seemed to move further away from safety, and yet something connected them all. A willingness to explore uncertainty, to let silence speak louder than dialogue, to show characters who are never fully in control of themselves. So how did a teenage vampire idol transform into one of the most unpredictable actors working today? To understand that journey, we need to look closely at the performances that changed everything. Robert Pattinson. Before Robert Pattinson became known for unpredictable performances and daring artistic choices, he was simply a young actor trying to prove he belonged in the industry. One of his earliest major roles came in the magical world of Harry Potter. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Pattinson played Cedric Diggory, a talented Hogwarts student admired for his courage and integrity. Cedric was everything a traditional hero should be: honest, brave, kind. Pattinson approached the role with sincere determination, wanting to appear as a genuine actor rather than just another teenage heartthrob. The character's tragic fate left a strong impression on audiences and quietly introduced Pattinson to millions of viewers around the world. But it was a few years later that his life changed completely. When Pattinson was cast as Edward Cullen in Twilight, the expectations were enormous. The character was written as an impossibly beautiful vampire locked in a dangerous romance with a human girl. For many actors, this role could have been played simply as a glamorous fantasy figure. Pattinson had a different idea. Instead of portraying Edward as a charming, supernatural prince, he leaned heavily into the character's emotional conflict. Edward was not simply romantic. He was tortured, haunted by his own nature, afraid of the very feelings that drew him closer to Bella Swan. On set, Pattinson's serious interpretation reportedly worried studio executives. At one point, he was even told that he needed to smile more or risk being replaced. But Pattinson resisted the pressure. He believed that Edward's restraint and intensity made the story more believable. A vampire who had lived for more than a century should not behave like a carefree teenager. The result was a performance defined by stillness, long silences, careful glances, moments where emotions seemed almost too dangerous to express. That restraint became one of the defining elements of the Twilight saga. Pattinson portrayed Edward as a figure constantly balancing love and self-control, as if every word carried the weight of a terrible consequence. After Twilight turned him into a global star, Pattinson could easily have stayed inside that image. Hollywood often rewards actors who repeat what already works. Instead, he chose a far riskier path. Rather than chasing more blockbuster fame, Pattinson began stepping into smaller films and unusual roles. Characters who were uncertain, vulnerable, sometimes even unlikable. It was the beginning of a transformation that would gradually redefine his entire career. And the first signs of that transformation were already appearing. After the global success of Twilight, Robert Pattinson faced a familiar crossroads. Many actors who achieve sudden fame from a blockbuster franchise spend the following decade repeating the same type of role. Studios offer similar scripts. Audiences expect the same persona. Careers quietly become predictable. Pattinson chose a different direction. Instead of protecting his image as a romantic leading man, he began working with directors known for unusual, sometimes unsettling films. One of the earliest signs of this shift came with Cosmopolis, directed by David Cronenberg. In the film, Pattinson plays Eric Packer, a young billionaire spending an entire day traveling across Manhattan inside a limousine. The role demanded something completely different from Twilight. There were no supernatural battles, no dramatic action sequences. Most of the film consisted of long conversations about power, capitalism, and existential dread. Pattinson approached the character with chilling restraint. Eric Packer rarely raises his voice. He speaks calmly, almost lazily, as the world around him slowly collapses. His financial empire begins to crumble. Protesters flood the streets outside, yet inside the limousine, he remains eerily composed. Pattinson plays him as a man addicted to control, someone who hides deep anxiety behind a mask of corporate calm. The performance surprised critics. Many realized for the first time that Pattinson was capable of far more than the brooding vampire that made him famous. Soon after, he took on another challenging role in The Rover. Set in a bleak, post-apocalyptic Australia, the film required a completely different energy. Pattinson plays Ray, a fragile and insecure young man who becomes entangled with a violent stranger played by Guy Pearce. Unlike the composed billionaire in Cosmopolis, Ray is timid and uncertain. Pattinson deliberately shrinks into the character. His voice becomes hesitant. His posture collapses inward. He often looks down rather than meeting other characters' eyes. The effect is striking. Ray feels like a person who has spent his entire life being ignored or bullied. When the older, harsher Eric finally acknowledges him, even with anger, Ray reacts with a strange kind of gratitude. Pattinson once explained that Ray follows Eric like a loyal dog, because Eric is the first person who ever seems to notice him. These two performances revealed something important about Pattinson's evolving career. He was no longer interested in appearing powerful or heroic. Instead, he gravitated toward characters who were uncertain, damaged, or quietly desperate. Each role pushed him further away from Hollywood's traditional expectations. And that journey was only beginning, because the next phase of Pattinson's career would demand something even more extreme. As Robert Pattinson moved deeper into independent cinema, his roles became increasingly intense. He was no longer just exploring complicated characters. He was pushing himself into emotional and physical extremes that few mainstream actors were willing to attempt. One of the clearest examples came with the Safdie brothers' film, Good Time. In the film, Pattinson plays Connie Nikas, a small-time criminal desperately trying to free his brother after a botched bank robbery. The story unfolds over one chaotic night in New York City. Everything about Connie is unstable. He lies constantly. He manipulates strangers without hesitation. And yet beneath the reckless behavior is a twisted form of loyalty toward his brother. To inhabit the role, Pattinson radically altered his appearance. He lost significant weight and adopted the restless energy of someone living on the edge of survival. During filming, he often stayed in character while walking through the streets at night, blending into the city so completely that people rarely recognized him. On screen, Connie moves like a man fueled entirely by adrenaline. One moment he is smooth and persuasive, convincing strangers to trust him. The next moment he is sweating, panicking, trying to escape the consequences of his own lies. Pattinson never softens the character. Connie is manipulative and often cruel, yet the performance reveals flashes of desperation that make his actions painfully human. If Good Time showed Pattinson's ability to portray raw desperation, The Lighthouse pushed him into something even darker. Directed by Robert Eggers, the film traps two lighthouse keepers on a remote island as isolation slowly drives them toward madness. Pattinson's character begins as a quiet and obedient worker, but the oppressive environment gradually breaks down his sanity. The performance demanded extreme commitment. Pattinson later revealed that he sometimes made himself physically sick between takes in order to capture the character's violent emotional state. The result is unsettling. His movements grow erratic. His voice shifts between suppressed rage and drunken hysteria. Scenes that begin with tense silence often explode into chaotic outbursts. Opposite Willem Dafoe's commanding presence, Pattinson becomes a live wire of frustration and paranoia. The audience watches as the character slowly loses any sense of stability. By the end of the film, the original man seems to have vanished entirely. Through performances like Good Time and The Lighthouse, Pattinson proved something that critics had begun to suspect. He was not simply experimenting with different roles. He was deliberately searching for characters that allowed him to explore the darkest corners of human behavior. And yet, Just when audiences thought they understood the direction of his career, Pattinson made another unexpected turn. After years of working in challenging, independent films, Robert Pattinson had quietly rebuilt his reputation. Critics now saw him not as a former teen idol, but as a fearless performer willing to take risks. That reputation opened the door for a return to large-scale cinema, but this time on very different terms. One of the first signs of that shift came with Christopher Nolan's Tenet. In the film, Pattinson plays Neil, a mysterious operative navigating a world where time itself moves in strange and unpredictable ways. Unlike many of his darker roles, Neil carries an unexpected charm. Pattinson allows the character to feel relaxed, almost playful. Even while surrounded by a complex and dangerous mission, he delivers lines with an easy confidence, offering quick remarks and flashes of humor that balance the intensity of the story. At the same time, there is always a hint that Neil knows more than he reveals. Beneath the relaxed exterior lies a quiet awareness of the sacrifices that may lie ahead. The performance brought something unusual to Nolan's intricate universe. Neil becomes the emotional anchor of the story, a steady presence guiding the protagonist through chaos. Soon after, Pattinson stepped into a role that many believed would define the next chapter of his career: the Batman. Taking on such an iconic character is never simple. Audiences already carry decades of expectations from previous versions. Pattinson approached Bruce Wayne and Batman as two halves of a deeply wounded person. His Bruce Wayne is withdrawn, almost ghost-like, a man still haunted by the childhood trauma that shaped his life. But when the mask goes on, something changes. His posture hardens. His gaze becomes sharp and calculating. Director Matt Reeves envisioned a version of Batman who functions less like a superhero and more like a detective. Pattinson embraced this idea. Instead of constant action, many scenes focus on observation, investigation, and quiet reflection. This Batman is intimidating, but also vulnerable. The performance captures a man who is still learning what justice means, someone driven by grief but slowly discovering responsibility. With The Batman, he could carry a massive blockbuster while still bringing the same emotional complexity that defined his independent work. And that rare balance brings us to the final reflection on his career. When looking back across Robert Pattinson's career, one thing becomes impossible to ignore: he refuses to stay the same. Many actors build their reputation around a single identity. They become known as the action hero, the romantic lead, or the industry rewards familiarity, and audiences often expect it. Pattinson has done the opposite. From the restrained intensity of Edward Cullen in Twilight to the emotional collapse of a lighthouse keeper losing his sanity, his performances move across an astonishing spectrum. One moment he plays a desperate criminal racing through neon-soaked city streets. In another film, he becomes a lonely man, drifting through space with nothing but silence and regret. Then he transforms again, a witty operative navigating the strange logic of time, a wounded vigilante searching for justice in the darkness of Gotham, a frightened young man struggling to survive in a brutal wasteland. Each character feels entirely different, yet something connects them all. Pattinson approaches every role with a willingness to explore uncertainty. His characters are rarely comfortable. They hesitate. They doubt themselves. Sometimes they break completely. But those moments of instability are exactly what make the performances feel real. That approach has gradually reshaped how audiences see him. What once looked like the career of a teenage heartthrob has evolved into something far more interesting. Pattinson has become an actor who cannot easily be categorized. He moves between blockbuster spectacles and strange independent films with equal commitment. And perhaps that is the real secret behind his range. He does not choose roles that protect his image. He chooses roles that challenge it. So the next time Robert Pattinson appears on screen, the real question may not be what character he is playing. The real question is this: what unexpected direction will he explore next? If one thing is certain, it is that Robert Pattinson's range is far from finished.